The morning my father was buried, the woman sleeping with my husband arrived wearing my dress, and somehow, that wasn't even the worst part. The sunlight that day was too bright for grief, slicing through the quiet cemetery like it didn't belong there. I remember standing beside the polished oak coffin, my fingers trembling against the black fabric I had chosen so carefully the night before, thinking this would be the hardest moment of my life. I thought saying goodbye to my father would break me completely. I didn't know that betrayal would be standing just a few feet away, dressed in something that used to be mine. Before we go deeper into this story, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and finding strength even when life feels unbearable, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Her name was Seraphine Cross, and she walked into the funeral like she belonged there. Her chin lifted slightly, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were stepping onto a stage instead of sacred ground. The black silk dress she wore clung to her perfectly, and I recognized every seam, every fold, every detail. It had been hanging in my closet just weeks ago, a dress my father had gifted me on my birthday, saying it reminded him of strength and elegance. Seeing it on her felt like watching someone rewrite my memories in real time. People noticed. Of course they did. There was a ripple in the crowd, a subtle shift of whispers that moved like wind through leaves. But no one said anything directly to me. They never do, not when the truth is too uncomfortable. My husband, Victor Hale, stood a few steps behind me, pretending to be composed, pretending to be a grieving son-in-law. His eyes never met mine. They lingered instead on her, brief glances that told me everything I had been trying to deny for months. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the distance in his voice, it all suddenly had a face, a name, and a stolen dress. But grief has a strange way of muting chaos. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them. I simply stood there, feeling something inside me harden into quiet clarity. Because beneath the shock, beneath the heartbreak, there was a small, steady voice reminding me of something important. The will had already been changed. My father, Arthur Voss, had always been a man who saw more than he said. In the last months of his life, when illness had softened his body but sharpened his instincts, he had started asking questions. Not directly accusing, not pointing fingers, but watching, listening, noticing the cracks in my marriage that I had tried so desperately to hide. One afternoon, under the golden warmth of sunlight streaming through his study windows, he had taken my hand and told me that life doesn't punish betrayal immediately, but it always collects its debts. At the time, I thought he was speaking about business, about the complicated empire he had built over decades. I didn't realize he was preparing me for something much more personal. A week later, he had quietly called his lawyer. Standing at his funeral now, with Seraphine's presence cutting through the air like a blade, I understood exactly what he had done, and why. The service moved forward in a blur of muted condolences and rehearsed sympathy. People spoke about my father's generosity, his wisdom, his ability to lift others even in their darkest moments. I listened, but my attention kept drifting, pulled toward the undeniable tension standing behind me. Seraphine didn't look ashamed. She didn't look uncertain. If anything, she seemed almost expectant, as if she believed she was stepping into a life that had already been prepared for her. Victor, on the other hand, looked increasingly uneasy. His confidence faltered as the minutes passed, as though he sensed that something wasn't aligning with whatever future he had imagined. After the burial, we gathered at my father's estate, a sprawling home filled with memories, laughter, and the quiet strength of a man who had always been my anchor. The walls felt different now, heavier, as though they carried the weight of everything left unsaid. Mr. Keaton, my father's longtime attorney, stood near the fireplace with a folder in his hands. His presence alone shifted the room, drawing attention, creating a silence that felt almost electric. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, though not everyone understood its significance. Victor moved closer, his posture subtly changing, a hint of anticipation creeping into his expression. Seraphine stood beside him, her fingers brushing against his arm in a gesture that was both casual and possessive. They looked like two people already celebrating a victory they believed was theirs. I stayed where I was, my hands clasped together, my heart steady in a way that surprised even me. When Mr. Keaton began to speak, his voice was calm, measured, and unwavering. He spoke of my father's legacy, his intentions, his desire to ensure that everything he had built would be protected and used with integrity. Then, he opened the folder and began to read. What followed wasn't dramatic in tone, but its impact was undeniable. Every asset, every property, every share of my father's company, everything had been placed solely in my name. Not jointly with my husband. Not shared. Not conditional. Mine. There was a pause in the room, a moment where the words seemed to hang in the air, waiting to be fully understood. Then came the shift. Subtle at first, then unmistakable. Victor's face drained of color, his confidence collapsing into something fragile and uncertain. Seraphine's expression tightened, the carefully constructed composure cracking just enough to reveal disbelief. The future they had been quietly building, the one they thought was within reach, had just slipped through their fingers. Mr. Keaton continued, explaining that my father had made this decision after careful consideration, ensuring that his legacy would remain protected from external influences. His words were polite, professional, but the meaning behind them was sharp and clear. My father had known. And he had acted. For the first time that day, I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not even satisfaction, but a quiet sense of justice. Not loud or dramatic, but steady and grounding, like the earth beneath my feet. Victor tried to approach me afterward, his movements hesitant, his voice low and uncertain. I didn't need to hear what he had to say. Some apologies come too late, weighed down by intentions that were never pure to begin with. Seraphine didn't stay long after that. The confidence she had arrived with had faded, replaced by a silence that spoke louder than any words. The dress, the one she had worn so boldly, no longer looked like a symbol of victory. It looked like what it truly was, something borrowed, something that was never hers. As the room slowly emptied, I found myself standing alone near the window, looking out at the sunlight stretching across the gardens my father had loved. For the first time since his passing, I felt something other than grief. I felt strength. Not because I had won something, but because I had been protected, even when I didn't realize I needed it. Life doesn't always give us justice in the way we expect. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wrapped in decisions made long before the truth fully reveals itself. My father hadn't confronted me with accusations or forced me to face what I wasn't ready to see. Instead, he had given me something far more powerful, the ability to stand on my own when everything else fell apart. And that was his final gift to me. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that strength can rise even from betrayal, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Stories like this are a reminder that even in our hardest moments, something good can still take root. Special request: comment below with the word strength if you believe that difficult endings can lead to powerful new beginnings. I didn't confront them that day. I didn't need to. Some truths don't require confrontation, they reveal themselves fully in the consequences that follow. As I walked through my father's home, now carrying both his absence and his protection, I realized that losing him had not left me empty. It had left me stronger, clearer, and finally ready to choose a life that was truly mine. And for the first time in a long while, the sunlight didn't feel harsh anymore. It felt like a beginning.